Hi, in an entirely new format and ratio, I'd like to talk about Larian games, Baldur's Gate 3 and Dungeons & Dragons. Baldur's Gate 3 has been utterly dominant across Game Awards, and there's no wonder. It has been praised in the most popular tabletop role-playing game that is out at the moment. Often it's the only game of that genre they've even heard of. And it's easy to see why. Dungeons & Dragons is having its own moment, being covered in everything from Stranger Things through to the Dungeons & Dragons movie that did surprisingly well given the historical performance of games being converted into movies, and especially the historical legacy of attempts to turn Dungeons & Dragons into films and TV shows. Baldur's Gate 3 should be a goldmine for Dungeons & Dragons, converting an audience of video game role players into tabletop role players, teaching people, again, if they needed reminding, that tabletop role playing is defined by Dungeons & Dragons. And given that Dungeons & Dragons is the dominant player in the market, you'd have thought that this would be a beneficial relationship for both parties for years to come. Instead, recently, Baldur's Gate 3 developers Larian Studios declared that they are cancelling plans to build any DLCs for Baldur's Gate 3, and that their next project won't have anything to do with Dungeons & Dragons at all. For clues as to why that is, here's one of the speeches that their CEO, Sven Vincke, gave at one of the recent awards.
I've been fighting with publishers my entire life, so it's like, and I keep on seeing, I keep on seeing the same mistakes over and over and over, and it's always the quarterly profits. The only thing that matters is the numbers, and then you fire everybody, and then like next year you're going to see, shit, I'm out of developers, and you're going to start hiring people again, and then you do acquisitions, and then you put them in the same loop again, and it's just been broken and broken and broken. You don't have to. You just can make reserves, slow down a little bit, slow down on the greed, be resilient, take care of the people, don't lose the institutional knowledge that's been built up in all of those people that you lose every single time, so that you have to go through the same cycle over and over and over. Right?
For someone who has just become one of the dominant players in gaming, someone who has swept up all the awards, has built more critical and community goodwill than most game developers dream of, someone whose smash hit game still has tens of thousands of players logging on every day to play it, you'd have thought that he'd have a lot more positive to say about the industry. But perhaps developments at the partners for Baldur's Gate 3, Wizards of the Coast, reveal the answers to why he's feeling so glum. Because after seeing this smash hit, development of their prize product, Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, into a video game, Wizards of the Coast conducted mass layoffs, including laying off most of the employees who worked with Larian Studios to bring Baldur's Gate 3 to life. Larian Studios was not impressed. And this brazen decision to punish their own employees for their successes is part of the industry trends that Vincke was condemning so much coming from other gaming publishers, where employees are rewarded with success and filling the pockets of the shareholders of their companies by completing successful games, by seeing their careers at those studios cut off. Instead of building a deep pool of committed developers, beloved by the community, who work together with them, these publishers instead raise the earth behind them, leaving nothing that might pull any profits from the pockets of the shareholders, the only people they actually care about. And it is this predatory, exploitative game studio situation that he was pointing at, one that Wizards of the Coast is a part of. Because this community goodwill that Larian has built hasn't come from nowhere. They've been building it for years by building a collaborative relationship with the community who play their games. They repeatedly praise and share the works that they inspire by their community. They get community members involved. They promote their voice actors. They show open enthusiasm for the same hobbies that their audience shares. They see themselves as part of the community that they are providing for. How things work at Wizards of the Coast couldn't be more different. It's only been just over a year now since the open game license controversy, where Wizards attempted to eradicate the entire industry of third-party publishers who thrive around Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition and helped make it the thriving ecosystem that it was. The backlash to their decision to eradicate third-party publishers and bring everything in-house under their new edition was so severe that over the course of a couple of months they backtracked, but not before a bunch of those third-party publishers teamed together and developed their own open license which everyone could publish under, and we're seeing the fruits of their work coming out this year. This isn't the first time that Wizards of the Coast have shown open contempt for the community that keeps their games alive, instead of seeing them as partners in building games together. The kind of partnership that exists between games masters and their players. And it's those games masters that tabletop role-playing relies on. Because in the end, they're the most dedicated and useful supporters any game system can have. They're the ones who build the games that the players take part in. Which games get played? For a lot of the fantasy space, a lot of generic, tropey tabletop role-playing games, games masters have the choice between dozens of different systems that they can use. Dungeons & Dragons is just the best known of them. And the best thing you can do to empower your competitors and drive those games masters away, along with all their players, is tell them that their contributions aren't welcome. Attempt to seize their works under your copyright. Eradicate the third-party publishers whose work those games masters use to bring their settings to life, to give their players more options. And yet, that's the route that Wizards of the Coast chose to take last year, only backtracking when they realised just how poorly it was going over. But a Wizards of the Coast that was actually connected to the community in the same way that Larian Games is, that actually cared about their community first, wouldn't have made those decisions in the first place. It was a decision entirely driven by shareholder interests. And that is exactly the approach to gaming and publishing that Larian Studios hates so much. So why would they continue to work with a publisher who shows all the worst habits that they see as poisoning the gaming industry? Why wouldn't they look at other options? And yes, it might seem that Larian Studios and Wizards of the Coast are better off together. Larian gaining from the name recognition of Dungeons & Dragons, and Dungeons & Dragons gaining from the incredible success of Larian Studios games. But that's not how Larian might see it. Instead, they see their success as built on just how tight-knit a relationship they have with their community, built on the incredible loyalty that they have managed to build up, built on taking the time to make good games backed by developers who are valued by the companies that they work for. They don't get any of that from Wizards of the Coast. Instead, what they might see is that Wizards, in its behaviour, in its treatment of its fan base, in its treatment of its partners, as an active threat to its reputation, that is what has allowed it to thrive. Personally, I think Larian Studios is better off without Wizards of the Coast. Personally, as a games master myself, I'm looking at other game systems that I can introduce my players to. I've already started playing a couple of them, moving them away from Dungeons & Dragons and an ecosystem which I don't think is sustainable, because I don't think that this is a publisher who cares about sustainability at all. All they care about is this quarter's numbers and how much money they can shove in the pockets of their shareholders, even if that means getting rid of absolutely everyone who has helped make that money in the first place. Why wouldn't Larian see the money on the wall and see that the moment that Wizards of the Coast think that they can make more money by ditching them than by keeping them on in the short term, they'll do it. No matter how successful their relationship has been so far, and no matter how successful it might be in the future. Larian Studios CEO was right to say that the blame for mass industry layoffs in the games industry lies on greed, on a fixation on quarterly profits at the expense of sustainability of the industry and at the expense of making good games. Because for these publishers, the quality of the games and the enjoyment of their fan base is meaningless. It means absolutely nothing. And the potential for growth 5 years, 10 years into the future also does not matter. All that matters to them is delivering billions to their shareholders this quarter. After this quarter's numbers come through, all that will matter is what comes next quarter. This is what led to the collapse of Embracer Group, probably the fastest moving of the games publishers, who bought up dozens of studios only to have one deal go wrong and immediately demolish most of the studios that they bought, those that couldn't escape. All those studios, all the incredible work they put in for years, all the people who worked there and put in that work to develop games that people loved, meant nothing. I think Larian Studios is going places, and if they show that they are better off without Wizards of the Coast, I think a lot of tabletop role-playing is going to take their lead. And I think a lot of games masters are going to start looking even more carefully at other publishers who care more about their communities, care more about their players.